Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades, happy Easter Friday. One of the few days of the entire year that's a Friday that you can enjoy a big meaty meal on. So enjoy the solemnity of Easter Friday. I'm used to getting cheese pizza or sushi or something on Fridays, but I got pepperoni pizza today. So deal with it. And people online were asking me, are you trying to start static with the Orthodox who are fasting in a really hardcore way today? I'm like, no, I don't know. Like everybody else, I don't even know when their fasting is. God bless them. No, why would I be doing that? This is for everybody else. This is Easter Friday. So no, the answer is no. Anyway, we have a special show today, and it's a show about etiologies. That means explanations from beginnings. Remember in The Hobbit when they say, you know, Gollum loved to look for explanations in beginnings. That's what we're doing. What is this whole seculum obscurum, this whole period of the post-conciliar world in our Catholic lives really circumscribed by? And we're going to talk about why it's been so strange to live in this time as a Catholic. Joining me is Mr. Robert Marro, who has a whole book on what we're talking about tonight, which is specifically Pope Paul VI. Robert Marro was a friend and a confidant of the late, great Father Malachi Martin. And Rob, I'm excited to have you on the show again today.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. We were on with our mutual Frank, quite frankly, and this is when we set this one up. And I just, look, I want to do this little intro thing where all of the Spurgs and the folks that have been Catholic for a year and a half, I just did a show celebrating their entry into the church this Easter, last Easter. It's a truly beautiful thing. But people, if you're spurging out about the fact, and I do say fact, that Pope Paul VI, Francis for his part, others, are simultaneously Roman Catholic pontiffs and at the same time complex moral figures, then you're just going to have to be Catholic a little longer. Just sit there in your culottes and get used to the fact that being Catholic requires us to gel with the simultaneous facts that the Pope is Peter, but that Peter is even the sainted Peters. We've had 267 Peters. Even the sainted Peters did some really cowardly things, but we've had some really nasty ones. And I've kind of prepped for this show by doing an all 267 popes ever show, or it was a series of 3 shows during Holy Week. I also prepped for this show by saying I'm excited. All the newbies are new to the faith. I've covered Pope Leo for about a year now, on and off. And the important thing is this: papal minimalism. You have to dig papal minimalism because this is the teaching of Vatican I, the Gasser intervention. And if you don't hold that at the front of your mind as you hear about some of the ghastliness of the modern church and perhaps where it comes from, then you're going to get spun off and sound like a Spurg. So before we jump into even that really initial reflection, I would just say I'm really honored to have Robert Marro back on the show with me, and it's going to be a good one. It's on this difficult character of Pope Paul VI, the second Vatican II Pope. John the 23rd died, about 20 months into the council that he had labored so hard to really change. Vatican II wasn't what it was supposed to be. We'll talk about that in a second. And then Paul VI picked up for him and did a lot of mischief. And we're going to talk about the man himself and why he might have had proclivity for mischief. First, I want to remind everybody that we are on Locals, not Patreon. Was kicked off of Patreon. We're looking for $13 a month local supporters because we have to keep the light on around here. We are sending out something called the Parish Orphan Patron Pack to all new or upgraded $13 a month patrons. You get all of these neat things. You get this mailer, which is itself cool. A God Save the Patriarchy button which you can wear around And it's nifty to wear around because it's got all of the scriptures written around it. So if you happen to be wearing your button and you get accosted by some feminists saying F the patriarchy, you just say, well, if you're Christian, look at all of these passages here, then we'll talk again. Anyway, you get two magnets, the two biggest books associated with this channel, Catholic Republic and The Case for Patriarchy, as fridge magnets. You get a little Calvin, the Capuchin monk sticker here, the symbol of the show, and you'll get one of these two really neat memento moris. They remind us of our death. That's what Calvin does here. And it's a reactionary chic autographed hand embroidery by Steph Gordon. And I say autographed because it's signed at the back. So you get all of this stuff just for becoming a $13 a month patron. And it's where it's at. Hard goods, not just bit ink and not just, you know, digital file. You get a PDF of my latest poem or whatever. I've heard some wacky stuff that people do on Patreon. Like, yeah, you get to hear my poem. It's like, okay, man, no one wants to hear your poem. They do want hard goods, though. Okay, so Rob, you and I spoke a bit earlier today. We've spoken a lot the last week. God bless you, yes. By the way. You're recovering from a kind of horrifying infection. So everybody pray for Rob. But we planned this show out, and I want to talk to you about why it's absurd. Before we get into your specific stuff, let's just be two Catholic guys chatting about why it's absurd, sure. Historically speaking, for any Catholic to get really bent out of joint when you say this or that pope in history was a bad guy. Your first crack at it.
Well, my first crack at it would be that because first off, they're humans. The only perfect human was number one, Jesus Christ, true God and true man. And then after him, Our Lady, the sinless creation. In fact, if you've got a second, I've got a good joke for you. Do you remember the passage in the gospel where the Pharisees brought forth before our Lord the woman convicted in adultery? And they said, by the law of Moses, she has to be stoned. And what did he say? Let he who is among you without sin cast the first stone. Well, what the Bible left out was that a rock comes whizzing out of the crowd and narrowly misses the woman who is accused of adultery. And Jesus looks out over the crowd, kind of sighs and goes, "Oh, Mom."
I like it.
Well done. Well played.
I kind of like that. You know, it's a different image for me, but we're going to have people spurging out in the comments. Welcome to everything you say, any little squint you squint, every laugh, every smirk, every, bit of collar tugging or shirt adjustment or your ties off center. There's going to be people complaining and that.
Are they going to be freaking out about my hat?
Yeah, maybe they're going to be. Hey, dude,
World.
What kind of trad are you? You're a Tim Gordon style trad. You know, you're not in a full 3-piece suit. I'm
a Wayne's World trad.
Yeah. Amen. So I like your answer though. In all seriousness, the Pope's a human.
That's right.
There's nothing in the charism of bishop, right? The highest order of ordination. And there's not any special charism of the sort I'm about to adumbrate of the Bishop of Rome that says that they're sinless or that when they're speaking, unless they invoke, the special charism every moron knows about, this only happened for sure twice in 2,000 years, two to 5 times in 2,000 years, ex cathedra personal infallibility, that they're different from anyone else. So when you say, don't say that about, don't say something pejorative about Biden or Obama, the office he holds is supposed to be venerated. And you're like, well, for one thing, supposed to be. But secondly, even if assuming that I venerate the office of president, I definitely do of Pope. we're talking about a distinguishability between the man and the office he holds.
That's right.
I said this to you today. It's conceptual, but when the man's in the office, it's ontologically not distinguishable. It's conceptually differentiable, but not ontologically. So it's like, look, I respect the office, but when the office is held by a crumb bum like Biden or Obama, I respect the office, but it's going to be really abstract because I don't respect this bad man that's currently sitting in the office. That is really very apropos for Roman Catholics. I'm knocking over my patron bag. Is it not? I mean, that's, I think, what people need to hear.
No, I think you're right on the mark there, Tim. Too often, people conflate the person with the office, and what we have, you can make an arguable case, suffered through for the past 13, 14 years under Francis, makes your case precisely. I mean, the things that he did and said, which were either heretical or objectively scandalous. I mean, what Pope goes out and praises the Italian, an old lady who's the Italian inventor of the bicycle pump abortion machine, and praises her as a great contribution to Italian society? What, that she removed 25,000 babies from it? I mean, and that's where I think the distinction you just pointed out comes into play. You have to be able to separate the man from the office, unless, and this is a distinction, unless the man uses the office to advance either heterodoxy or, some people would argue, apostasy.
Yeah, and that's a whole, I mean, which neither of us are going to go on and make a case.
We're not the magisterium.
No, we're not the magisterium. And Paul VI had neither of us are huge, wild enthusiasts of Vatican II documents, but neither of us are really taking any of that on tonight. I certainly don't. No. I don't think there are major heterodoxies that follow from the Vatican II documents. So that's kind of weird and boring and passé. We're talking about the man, Paul VI himself, and he also missed the opportunity. Missed me on that, dude, when he was talking about contraception, and he backed up Casti Connubii more or less in a lesser way with in 1968 with Humanity. But okay, so we're going to talk about the man himself. Here are two nota benes as we start out. The first one is we've had 267 popes. 52 out of the first 54, and I've done the research, 52 out of the first 54 were all canonized saints. 31 out of the first 31 were martyrs. So these guys were holier, by and large, than the next, that's about the first sixth of popes. If we talk about the 52, that's the first sixth. So if we divide the timeline of all the popes we've had, you just pope by pope, not to forget the longer and the shorter. Don't do it proportionally that way. Just the first 52, that's the first sixth. Those guys are significantly holier than most of the rest of the popes we've had. And people who want to spurg will get their noses bent out of joint and say, well, how do you know? Well, because my brother's in Christ, my sister's in Christ, women of the word. Wow. We've only had 81 canonized popes, and 52 of them were canonized out of the first 54. What that leaves, doing the arithmetic, is 29 popes in the last 212. Okay, so you had 52 54ths of the first popes, almost everyone. That's like 97.5%, 97% were saints. But since then, of that last 212, it's like 1 in 6, 1 in 7 are canonized. And in that time period, when you had the 6 out of 7 or the 5 out of 6, you do the exact fractional math, who were not saints. They didn't miss it by a narrow mark, most of them. In that time period, before the Orthodox even left in the 900s, before the Orthodox didn't miss a beat. They didn't leave because of the Saeculum Obscurum. There was a period called the Pornocracy or the Saeculum Obscurum in the 900s, where we had so many filthy, dirty dogs in the chair of Peter that it was called the Pornocracy. And that was Catholic historians that called it that. So my point is that when you consider, one, the Catholics are papal minimalists. Catholics who know, Vatican I, the Gasser intervention lays out very clearly that the Pope he's a guy. If he does the job well, like 52 of the first 54 popes, he's a great hero. He'll be a great hero. We've had some amazing sainted men in that capacity, but really, if you're one of the 212 minus 29, which I guess would be 183 out 183 of the last 212 popes, then those guys, a lot of those 183 we've had more recently are not just mediocre. A lot of them were bad, and you'd have to have cognitive dissonance to think that we have to worship those guys. So before we say what kind of Pope Paul VI was or what kind of man he was, before we even get onto that, I just wanted to drop that out there and say, you can be a good man, can be a mediocre man, can be a very bad man and be Pope. And they're all really, really amply exampled in the chair of Peter. So I just wanted to give you a chance to say that, because and then I'm going to address one other category.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. And out of those remaining popes, Tim, the ones that I think you and I would say arguably deserve a fair hearing at sainthood, for example, Pius IX or Pius XII, their causes have been delayed by what a lot of people see as petty political reasons. I mean, thank God, and I do see it as a grace of God that Bishop Sheen will be beatified this year.
Right.
All right. But as you and I were talking offline before, you're also going to have the beatification of Bishop Labaka, the Capuchin bishop who was killed in the Amazon back in the late 1980s. And wow, you want to talk about a moral rabbit hole? I sent you an email about that.
Would you tell us in a 2-line synopsis why Bishop Labaka being canonized is not such a tidy thing for us Catholics? It's not so neat.
Exactly, because he allegedly ministered to the Amazonian tribes down in South America for many years. He was a great proponent and full-throated public proponent of liberation theology, but he was, that the phrase that's become au courant in the last 25 years or so of you have to meet people where they are. Well, he thought that meant getting naked and meeting the Amazonian tribesmen and women in their little naked pagan rituals. And the things and this is not scurrilous. It's not, dirt dug up against enemies of the church. It's actually in the man's published autobiography, what he did. And, I can't bring myself to talk about it, because if I go into too much detail, my knees will be burnishing a confessional kneeler tomorrow afternoon. I mean, it is that horrific.
He did sex acts with these tribes people that at a young
some of whom were below the age of 16.
Right. And some in male, right?
Yes.
A lot of them. So he's gonna be a saint. Who beatified him? Francis? Or
no, he's not. He was made venerable in May 2025 by Leo, and it was just recently confirmed by the Vatican in February that he will be beatified later this year.
Okay. And canonization a lot of times follows upon that. They've, like you pointed out,
correct.
Pio Nono, he's beatified, right? I don't think he's venerable yet. I think he's beatified. So kind of the first step, and that's being held up. And he's a based pope. He's one of my favorites, Pio Nono. Pius the 12th isn't even, I don't even think he's had anything begun on him. I don't think he's beatified.
I think his cause was introduced and then kind of came to a grinding halt.
Right. Without any of the halfway steps. So
can I ask you guys, because I think a lot of Catholics are sitting here thinking, well, what about that? You know, the canonizations of these guys who, let's say these things are true, they're terrible people, and they get canonized. What are we supposed to do with that, intellectually speaking?
We'll give you
familiar, Tim?
Yeah. This is we kind of prepared for this this morning on the phone when I was at the store for the 7th time of the day. I was at the store for the 9th time of the day right before we went live because we have stomach flu in the house, so I've been going back and forth. But yeah, Rob and I spoke about this and prepared. Okay, like one thing I looked up, you know, the lawyer in me was like, how about this? I know, and most people know, Constantine is a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So I looked up, when did he become a saint? After 1054? And of course, the answer is no. He'd been venerated as a saint by the Eastern Catholic churches since shortly after he died, since the late 300s. And the point there is that the Eastern Church has always had this sainthood tradition, which is predicated more on impact, you know, holy impact on the world rather than personal holiness. And that's why they have someone like Constantine as a saint. His personal holiness is not self-evident, but his impact on the world, legalizing Christianity, is inestimably high. But the point is, the Catholic Church has always allowed, in the first millennium, legitimate sort of organic cult of saints to govern whether or not they're considered a saint. Now that we consider it a more formal process, you know, my point is this: if we ever reconcile, if we ever have the Council of Florence too, where we actually reconciled with the Eastern Orthodox there in the 1400s, for like a couple of weeks we were reconciled. There was no more schism. If we ever have Florence, you know, second part of Florence where we get it done and the Russian Orthodox don't twist their arms back into schism, then that's not going to be that's not going to be a sticking point. It's not dogma. There's never going to be an ecumenical council held over is Constantine a saint or not? How do we believe the same de fide truths, Catholics and Orthodox, because the Orthodox have, for most of Christian history, held this view about Constantine that he's the saint. So it can't be a dogmatic issue. And so whether or not what you're really going to tell us tonight, Rob, because it's you gotta either believe that a bad man can be pope, or if bad man can't be pope, especially if he's saint, then he's not really a saint. You have to have, it has to be one or the other. And people are going to get mad at me and they're going to get mad at you, and that's fine. I'm very comfortable with people mad at me.
I've got thick skin.
First
almost
segment,
too comfortable.
Almost too comfortable. Almost, you know, it's like you know, it's a bet noir.
We'll all be comfortable.
We'll all be comfortable. So you know what I mean? You know, I just want to, that's the end of my shtick. I've studied all the popes. I've done a show on them recently. Anybody that wants to know, we've had a pornocracy of wicked, vile popes. Now we've had some of the best human beings ever to walk the earth also sit in the chair of Peter. We've had some real cowards and sort of mediocre men. We've had, you know, put them in 3 categories. And I would just say, now that we can shift to the main story, that Paul VI, there's a lot of evidence out there that he is category 3. He was a bad man. I don't know. I mean, you're friends with Malachi Martin, and you were friends enough to trust him. And the new bit of evidence that you didn't put in a book, I don't know what you want to say. I'll let you spin.
Sure. No, I don't care. Whatever you're comfortable with me putting out on the table, Tim, I'm good with it.
On the table.
Okay. No, well, you know, one of the things, it devolved from the conversation that we're getting to, devolved from one night over dinner back in the mid 1990s. And we were talking about the new mass and, you know, the infamous role of Annibale Bugnini. And I said, you know, it seems that, you know, Bugnini was ignominiously packed off to Tehran, Iran in late 1975, where there were all of about 18 Catholics in a city of 20 million people.
Right.
And he's the papal nuncio there to Ayatollah, the Shah, and then the Ayatollah. Malachi, what happened? And he said that his exact words, I'm paraphrasing, but this is very close. He said, a group of us held a discreet meeting with Pope Paul, and we presented him with a dossier. And the dossier included photographic and documentary evidence that Annibale Bugnini was a brother in the Propaganda Due Italian Lodge, the Freemasonic Lodge, the one that was involved in the 1970s with all of the shenanigans with banks and the mafia and the Vatican. And he was a member of that lodge. But Malachi said, but that's not, because I asked him, I said, well, would that have been enough for the Pope to say, because Paul VI did not have the reputation of, for lack of a better phrase, being an iron-fisted Pope.
No.
All right. I get the feeling that, when Pius X issued the encyclical against modernism, for the rest of that day, probably no one wanted to bump into him in the Vatican hallways.
Right.
All right. But Paul VI was not the same. He was more of a milquetoast sort of personality. So I asked Malachi, I said, so given that, even if this information was put in front of the Pope, why did he take the very drastic action that he took with a one-way ticket to Tehran? He said, because in the dossier was also photographic evidence showing from the early 1950s an Archbishop, Giovanni Montini, being inducted as a member of the lodge in Milan, in northern Italy. And there were also pictures of him, not in flagrante delicto, but pictures that apparently black and white that left no doubt that he was enjoying the romantic company of other men.
Yeah.
And Malachi said that, this wasn't held over the Pope as do this with Bugnini or else. It was more like, here are your peccadillos. Here are Bugnini's peccadillos. It is known to very important people here within the Holy See. And because of that, Your Holiness, at least in the matter of Bugnini, you have to do the right thing. He has caused, as a Freemason, he has caused great damage to the church. And Bugnini, a month later, January or so, 76, he was packed off to Tehran, Iran. And, in his later autobiography, Bugnini was rather indignant about the whole affair. Yeah. Up until the day he died, he was defiantly proud of everything he accomplished with the Novus Ordo Missae.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And just real fast, because I know a lot of people are, reacting to the allegation of accusing a pope of homosexuality. This is well established. This is the allegations against Paul VI. You can check out the Wikipedia page, which is on the screen right now. But wasn't he also wasn't he charged with actually having to come out and deny that he was a homosexual? Because
he did have to. Yes, Steph, you're exactly right. He did have to deny that. But the thing to remember regarding Paul VI is that, like, for example, we know that infamous group of perverts known as NAMBLA, right? The North American Man-Boy Love Association. Ugh, now I got to go gargle. When they held their first organizational meeting in the late 70s in Boston, they claimed towards the Catholic Church that the church condemns sexual deviance, but they're a bunch of hypocrites because they reward personal sexual hypocrisy at the highest levels as long as outward loyalty is demonstrated towards the Vatican. And then they said in their statement, Cardinal Spellman and Paul VI are only two of the most recent examples.
Oh, wow.
And that was NAMBLA.
Wow. Yeah, Cardinal Spellman, that's the late great Archbishop Fulton Sheen's bête noire, right? That was his personal rival.
So these associations were well established long before he even became Pope, so much so that he actually had to, once he became Pope, really deal with this. And I'm seeing on the screen even now, you know, there was French magazines that were like actually even naming his quote unquote like long-term sexual partner, who was named as Paolo Carlini, who
the actor
had a small part in Audrey Hepburn's film Roman Holiday. So they're not only saying this is what we're accusing you of, but we're saying this is who we're actually accusing you of doing this with.
Yeah, and he had to address it. So this isn't, again, for the folk that think they're glib because they can distinguish between calumny and detraction. This is neither, right? These are literally old charges. A lot of young people, or even people that aren't so young, people my age, just were born after all this happened. We're just sort of reshedding light on it. And you, through your personal friendship with Malachi Martin, can talk, you know, in a position to talk about this. You can say, like, look, I didn't see the dossier with the...
That's right. I didn't see a dossier.
But
what I can talk to, Tim, all right, is the fact that, you know, it's common knowledge. I retired from the Central Intelligence Agency in what's called overt status. I can admit that I worked there. A lot of people who were in operations like me retire in covert status, meaning they will carry that employment association to the grave. All right.
Didn't say in your bio. I'm like, I can't remember. You openly talk about it, but I didn't want to.
That's correct. However, anyone who's a CIA employee, and especially an operations officer like I was, anything you produce that is any sort of written media, a book, a biography, and it literally gets as ludicrous as if you want to publish a book of your grandmother's Italian tomato paste recipes and you are a CIA officer, they have to review it for any compromising information before you can publish it. Doesn't matter, that has nothing to do with the CIA. But one of the things that I had put in there was I had a chapter in there about this because if you'll remember, if you've read the book, there was that the chapter entitled Mass Confusion.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And
downstairs. Yeah.
And in there, you know, there were I spoke to the deformations that can be present in the Novus Ordo Missae, which can invalidate the Mass. And one of the things that, you know, I had asked Malachi about was, you know, these things surrounding the Novus Ordo Missae, which got into the conversation about Bunini and then Paul VI. And because at the time that I knew Malachi, I was still active in the agency. And I went down into the archives in the headquarters the sub basement of the old headquarters building is where they used to have the microfiche archives of cable traffic. And a lot of this was confirmed going back as far as the 1930s. All right. If you'll remember the Cambridge spies in England, we mentioned that in our offline chat. Mm-hmm. There was that one, the last one, the fifth man to be outed was Anthony Blunt. Well, he was a well-known homosexual in the 1930s and 40s, and his sexual partner, all right, he was a British artist, Peter Montgomery. Peter Montgomery's brother was Hugh Montgomery, and they were not closeted homosexuals. They were rather flamboyant about it. And Hugh Montgomery, in about 1937, 1938, he's on the record as telling his brother, all right, that he and the young Montini had been romantically involved together. It's going back as far as the 1930s. So this is not something that appeared in, you know, Time magazine 8 years ago. This is something that goes back, on the order of 8 or 9 decades at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that's I'd forgotten about that part of our conversation today. There's all kinds of triangulations of allegations against Paul VI. Now, here's one thing that sticks out to me. This is just critical, I guess, active listening.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be worse from Malachi Martin and the other prelates' perspective that Annibale Bonini be left in his position, being the author of the new Mass? That's a good enough answer, it seems. But when he's a Freemason, why would that be worse than Paul VI being the guy, the standing Peter in the Palazzo? Why is that? Why would he be allowed to stay there, but Bonini has to go? Doesn't that seem like a crisis of priority?
Yes, but you forget that still at the time, there was still a vestigial sense of absolute papal power. You've heard all these stories about John Paul II and Benedict lamenting that their powers stopped at their office door.
Yeah.
But back in the 1960s, that did not hold sway. So, the Pope had to endure what a lot of people thought was calumny, but he did not have to endure the evidence in front of his face that Bonini had actively been conspiring to water down the Roman Rite. And some say it was at the direction of the lodge.
Right. Yeah, P2, Propaganda Due. This is highest level of Italian Masonry, right?
Yes.
It's actually Masonry. Yeah. So was Bonini. I want to talk about the Pecorelli list a little bit because people will be talking about this in the chat. The list that was published in, I think, 1968 by this Nino Pecorelli, who was a journalist who claimed he had 121 names of prelates, high-ranking prelates, including Casarelli, who's one of the key figures in Malachi's book, Windswept House.
Yep.
Cardinal Agostino Casaroli, Jean-Marie Vallot, another key figure in that book, the Vatican Secretary of State under Paul VI. Cardinal Sebastian Baggio, head of the Congregation for Bishops. Do these sound like some of the most powerful men in the church? I mean, top six.
Not only were they powerful, all right, but there are people who would argue that Cardinal Baggio, for example, was a modernist and apostate of the first degree, and he never should have been in the position he was in the Congregation for Bishops, because you have to remember that although the documented allegations against Paul VI as Montini go back to the 1930s, jump forward 4 decades, and Paul VI was instrumental in putting people in place like Cardinal Bernardin in Chicago, or Rembert Weekland in Milwaukee.
Right.
Right. And, we saw that, Dietrich von Hildebrand came out with his book, The Devastated Vineyard. And I think that's a very apropos description of what Paul VI wrought, because you can look back, and from an objective perspective, you can see that there began to be a more openness towards homosexuality in the clergy during John the 23rd's years, but a case can be made that the floodgates were opened under Montini.
Correct. Also, Pope Paul VI, Montini later in life, would change the voting rules on cardinals in conclave. That's a big important thing. He's the one that disallowed basically the old cardinals over 80 to have a vote, which was getting the old guard out of there before they even died. So you don't have to poison them, even though these guys are arguably P2. Paul VI was not on the Pecorelli list, right? Just everyone around him was?
I believe that's the case, yes. I don't think he was named in the Pecorelli list.
Okay, but it's 121 guys. This comes out during month that JP1 was Pope. Also beatified, 33-day pontificate, and he's already beatified, JP1. We were talking about the reason they're canonizing and beatifying all of these Vatican II popes, John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 2nd, and then John Paul the 1st is beatified. What did he even have time to do in his 33 days when this list broke? Well, they're just trying to make it where we can't critique these guys because they're clearly such bad guys. Leo the 13th is not a saint, but Paul the 6th is. Come on, get out of here.
Exactly.
Pius the 12th aren't saints, but John the 23rd is. Go take a hike, man. That's
exactly, because what it is, it's a very thinly disguised attempt to put the Second Vatican Council and everything that has rolled downhill from it in the decades since up on a plane where it's essentially uncriticizable. It cannot be touched. Right. They act like the church, and I hate the term synodal church because I feel that this synodal exercise is really a modernist Vatican III. But they're basically saying, by elevating these men to the honors of the altar, we are placing the Second Vatican Council above criticism.
Right. Yeah, that's I think what this is all geared to do. Another guy that appeared on the Pecorelli list is Marcinkus, Paul Marcinkus, who had deep mob connections, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, I mean, he was like a mobster, more or less, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was very intimately involved in the running of the IOR.
The Vatican Bank, that's right.
Yes, yeah. And, he was also very, very close with the very shadowy figures, Michele Sindona and Roberto Calvi.
Right.
And everybody remembers what happened to Roberto Calvi.
Yeah.
He ended up under Blackfriars Bridge with a noose around his neck.
Yeah.
And what people overlook is in his suit pockets, they were filled with bricks, mortar, and a small carpenter's square.
I didn't know the small carpenter's square thing, or the bricks are mortar. Yeah. But so Masonic imagery.
A little bit of a signal there to the rest of the club. Don't get out of line.
Man, that's crazy. So, yeah, there's a couple different directions I want to go. But speaking of the imagery, could we get this tweet out? I'll forget it.
Oh, sure. Is that the burial?
The burial of Paul. I don't think did I show you this ever? We have a verified picture. Sometimes I'll grok myself. I'll do a post on Twitter and then I'll just grok the living hell out of myself.
Am I right, grok?
So that all of the normies and spurgs and people that just can't, the papal maximalists that's just made up that popes can't be these bad guys. There's not a teaching in the church on that. We've had tons of bad guys, but they just insist on believing, like a Sede or an Eastern Orthodox. Well, of course, Sedes and Eastern Orthodox like to believe in papal maximalism because it disproves the faith, the Roman Catholic faith. But the dumbasses out there are the Roman Catholics who are papal maximalists when, Vatican I has this clear expression in the Gasser intervention of what it's, what the strictures and the boundaries of the papacy are supposed to be. So this is, did you want to read that tweet, Steph? I did this in preparation for today. This is the verified grave of Montini's mother.
I like that.
I was like, that's Donkey Kong. I'm trying to find the actual
country. That's not his mother. He's dancing on it. No.
That was the text you sent me today, right, Tim?
Yes, that's
picture.
Here, yeah, sorry. Tim is a man of many varieties of tweets. Yeah, video games.
I'm a variegated fellow.
Like Freemasonry, jokes about people's moms.
LeBron.
Yeah. All right. So it says this is the verified gravestone of, help me with the name. Is it Guida Augusti Montini? Is that right?
That's good enough.
Okay, thank you. Pope Paul's the sixth mother in the cemetery of Vero Lavacea near Braccia, Italy. Pope Paul VI himself designed the Masonic symbols, square, compass, triangle, and related tools on her gravestone in 1943.
And I grokked myself. I said, Grok, is this true? I think I also said something about the Pecorelli list.
And what did Grok say? Should I show?
And Grok is like, you just preach.
Grok was like, keep on,
preach, nigga. That's what Grok said.
Yeah.
No, it said, yeah, you're right. You're right, Tim. Good job. What does it say? The first photo depicts, could you show more there?
The bas relief on Guetta Augusti Montini's gravestone in that really long name, Italy place, as described in traditionalist Catholic sources. And they give the their reports. It features the geometric elements, triangle, square, cylinders, compasses, and tools, which those accounts interpret as Masonic symbols, with a claim that then Montini designed them himself in 1943. And the second photo is Paul VI with his Secretary of State, Cardinal Jean-Marie Villot, who does not appear on Mino Pecorelli's 1978 list of alleged Vatican Masons. Who does appear. Yeah. Sorry. Well, what am I doing here? Who does appear. Excuse me.
He was a bad cat. He was. Villot was a bad cat.
Can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, did you have conversations with the lady
Malachi about Villot? Yes, yeah. I did.
What
he told me was that Villot had been pushing in the 1970s for Archbishop Lefebvre to come from Icone down to Rome, all right, for a series of meetings. And Malachi was involved in Vatican intelligence. It's an organization, a very discreet organization called the Servizio Privato, or the private service of the Pope. And he was involved with that, as well as a number of other people. And they got wind of the fact that someone who worked for Villot went to Vatican intelligence and said, tell Archbishop Lefebvre that if he's going to come to Rome, to either take an airline flight or to take a train and make it first class. If he has a driver drive him from Switzerland, Villot will ensure that he has a fatal car accident on the way here.
Wow. So he didn't drive.
Not someone you turn your back on.
Yeah, no. Wow. That's crazy. And was that ever, obviously it's not looked into. This is these are the Wizard of Oz people, the people behind the guys behind the guys. So they don't get found out or anything like that.
Right. But if I can give you a little anecdote that kind of shows where the kind of access Malachi had into the upper reaches of the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
You remember back in 1995, John Paul II, in autumn of that year, visited the United States. And he went to, first he went to New Jersey, where he said a mass in the pouring rain at the old Giant Stadium. Then the next day he said mass at Yankee Stadium. Then that weekend he went down to Baltimore. Well, I was the agency's counterterrorism liaison to the Secret Service. At the time, the Archbishop in Newark was our old friend, Uncle Ted McCarrick. And he hated John Paul II. I'll never forget it because the Secret Service special agent in charge for the New York, New Jersey district, he and his people were meeting with Archbishop McCarrick and his vicar for the clergy for the Archdiocese of Newark for the planning of the Pope's visit. And what they did was they swore up and down on a stack of Bibles, pardon the pun, that to the Secret Service that they would not divulge the route of the papal motorcade from Giant Stadium to Sacred Heart Cathedral in Newark any sooner than 2 days before the Pope arrived in the United States. And 2 days later, it appeared on the front page of the Newark Star Ledger.
Wow.
It was kind of McCarrick's way of flipping the bird to the Secret Service. I was good friends with this guy, still am. He's retired now. And he called me up and he called me Bobby. And he's like, Bobby, what am I going to do? He goes like, this guy McCarrick is working against, he's Episcopalian. He says he's working against your Pope. He's putting him at risk. He published the exact damn motorcade route we asked him not to publish, and he turned around and published it. And then another thing was, one of the Secret Service agents had the misfortune of telling Archbishop McCarrick, my wife is gravely ill. I will be standing by the nose gear of Shepherd 1, the Alitalia 747, when the Pope comes off the Marine Corps helicopter. You know, the Pope usually says hello to some people. Would I be able to get the Pope just to remember my gravely ill wife in his prayers? And McCarrick said he came down like a hammer on an anvil. Absolutely not. The Pope is not going to go over and give preferential treatment to some Secret Service officer. So this guy, Pete, in the Secret Service comes to me and he goes, what do I do? He says, because obviously I'm dealing with duplicitous people in the Chancery offices in Newark. What do I do? And I said, let me make a couple of calls and I'll call you back in 2 days. And had lunch with Malachi the next day. And I laid it out all for him, chapter and verse. And he said, have your friend Pete meet us here for lunch on Friday, the Isle of Capri. And we did. Pete spilled the whole story to him. And Malachi said, fine. From now on, whenever you have to deal with Archbishop McCarrick or any of his people, all you do is smile, say yes, and nod like you're agreeing with them. He says, I will put you in touch with people in Rome who are going to completely cut them out of the loop. And first off, I know that took place because when the Pope, I have a picture. I actually have a beautiful photograph I can send you, a print of a photo I took at Newark Airport when John Paul II appeared in the doorway of Marine One, and he gave a benediction to the honor guard flight crew from the U.S. Navy that was lined up there. Then when he went down to the bottom of the stairway, he was greeted by McCarrick and his vicar for the clergy, plus some other local dignitaries. Then he turned around and he walked right over to the Secret Service agent standing under the nose gear of the Alitalia jet. And he put his hand on his shoulder, and you could see the guy was all choked up. And he bent his head, and John Paul II bent his head down. And this guy got emotional. And John Paul II basically embraced him and then gave him a blessing, and then turned around and came over to the line of people who were invited guests to greet the Pope before he took off for Baltimore.
Right.
But
wow.
that was a very big FU to Cardinal McCarrick, that we know you told the Secret Service they couldn't talk to the Pope, but somebody went around you.
Wow. I want to ask you something about Windswept House, because you're mentioning JP2. I mean, this is the Paul VI show, but
sure.
He's a gay Mason. It sounds like you told me earlier today you believe that 85 to 90%. But I want to ask you a JP2 question and let you respond to some summative kind of statements that one who might be listening to this might be inclined to make after they hear this. But first, I just want to say this. Everybody who's out there watching on a Friday night, we're trying this kind of new format for, Friday nights. A lot of Friday nights will be here. So subscribe to the channel if you're a new viewer. Make sure you like it. Leave a comment. Leave us super chats if you have questions for Mr. Rob Marro, personal for ex-CIA man and personal, very close friend of Father Malachi Martin. So, Rob, if it's cool with you, I want to ask you,
sure,
in a short paragraph, why in Windswept House does Malachi portray John Paul II as so plagued by ambivalence? I mean, that's like the hero of the novel just can't understand why JP2 is so ambivalent. And that's how I always feel when I look at JP2's actions. I mean, he knows the bad guys. The bad guys all hate him, but he keeps palliating them. Why? Like, why?
I'll tell you why. Because John Paul II came from a very stern Polish administrative mindset that once you give a man a job to do, you do not reach down into his job from above and interfere with what he is doing, good or bad. He really has to screw up royally badly in a way that reflects poorly on the entire Roman Catholic Church in order for the Pope to take action. Otherwise,
boxes. I mean,
it's
all
like wind-up toys. You wind it up, put it on the ground, and off it goes.
I mean, but according to things that are of public record and events that took place in Windswept House and the Pecorelli list, Casseroli, and all of these guys, they were checking that box. They were more than just bad administrators or something. I mean, the guys immediately surrounding the Pope were working directly against him. He had mutiny on his hands, according to Father Martin. So
yes, and what happened with that was that the Pope's mindset was that he was operating on a very almost mystically spiritual plane. He had a view, and this is tied into Fatima, especially after the assassination attempt. Before the assassination attempt, John Paul II thought that he was going to have a multi-decade, he did to an extent, but he was increasingly plagued by Parkinson's. But he believed he would have a vigorous multi-decade papacy in which he would go out and he would preach the gospel to the world. Then he got shot in St. Peter's Square. He then sent for translators and the official Third Secret of Fatima. He then read it, and from what Malachi told me, that kind of turned a switch inside John Paul II's head, in that things were already running the way they were running in the church. The problems that people saw, the defections from the priesthood, lack of practice of Catholicism, attendance at the sacraments, etc. And John Paul II saw it in a new light. He saw it in the light of Fatima, and he saw Fatima, especially the 1960 mandate to the Pope from Our Lady, as an either or. Either the Pope of 1960 publishes this message for the world to see, and Russia is consecrated properly, or it will set in motion a chain of geostrategic chastisements from God, which might be mitigated in prayer, but cannot be stopped. And John Paul II looked at that message and said, well, he drew the obvious conclusion. I'm not the Pope of 1960. My predecessor, John the 23rd, was. And that's when, have you ever heard of the little ad hoc speech, and this is verifiable, that John Paul II gave to the pilgrims in Fulda, Germany in 1980 about Fatima?
I've heard of this in support of the view that he's a sort of a supporter of the Third Secret being released.
Well, what he said was, the people asked him, they said, Your Holiness, why was the Third Secret not released? Mm-hmm. And he said, my predecessor, he kind of did some diplomatic soft shoe shuffle, but he said, my predecessors in the See of Peter diplomatically preferred not to release the contents so as not to allow the worldwide power of communism, to gain an advantage over the West that the West would not be able to respond to. And then he said, if you're only interested in the release of the secret because you're seeking sensationalism, then there's no point in releasing the secret. And here's where he kind of said the quiet part out loud. He said, on the other hand, if there does exist such a message that speaks of nations being annihilated in mere moments, right, and of great earthquakes and great floods wiping out entire countries, if the only reason you want to read that secret is to be titillated and sensationalized, then there's no point in publishing it because you don't think it can be averted. And that's when he held up his rosary and said, Here's the weapon from the Mother of God that is the only weapon that will fight the approaching evil. He also made another statement. He said, how often has the renewal, the authentic renewal of the church been effected in the blood of the faithful? This time, though it may be mitigated, it will not be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. That's what I thought you were referring to. There was like
he was operating on a very mystical level. So not that the administrative stuff was below him, but it probably did not come across his radar screen. He thought he was operating, you know, on a rarefied spiritual level.
That heaven had ordered the popes. It didn't say only the Pope of 1960. You buy that. I mean, that's a very JP2 move. I think I probably have a lower estimation of them than you do. Like, the popes are supposed to release Third Secret of Fatima around 1960 because it'll be clearer. Is a clear cultural moment. And John the 23rd says, I'm not going to do it, and he calls the seers some names, prophets of doom or something.
Prophets of doom.
Yeah, prophets of doom. Then Paul VI passes the buck, and then John Paul I, didn't even move all of his.
He didn't have time for coffee.
He didn't have time for coffee. He was killed by the mob, I think, according to associates of Marcinkus. There are mobsters today that talk openly about being the Godfather 3 guys that killed JP1, and then John Paul II, and he's simultaneously like, oh, look at the bad guys, they didn't read the message. But it's like, heaven didn't tell you to worry about Ostpolitik, that idea.
You're exactly right.
Of Eastern,
You're exactly right.
Russian. Heaven told you to release it, bro. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't
exactly
say. He's sitting there saying, well, it was good they didn't release it because of Ostpolitik and how the Russians would respond to this. I just don't know why more people. There's just not a lot of straight talkers in Rome. There's a lot of Romanita, and instead of just being like, well, what are you talking about, Holy Father?
I call it waffle. I call it weasel wording.
Yeah,
but yeah, we're on the same page, I think, because one of the things that not just Malachi, but also a very liberal cardinal who was a theological advisor to 4 popes, Cardinal Luigi Chiappi.
Yeah.
Right. He's on record as saying one of the most disturbing things in the Third Secret is that the great apostasy in the church will begin at the very summit.
Very tippy top. Yeah.
So what does that tell you? So can you imagine if you're John the 23rd and you're reading a message that says the great apostasy might begin with you? Why do you could build a very good case why he then made the statement, well, this message obviously doesn't refer to our pontificate.
Yeah. I don't think he was just worried about being accused falsely of something, being framed for a crime. Is probably just, this is the great paradox of Fatima, since we've kind of gone here, because this is all roads lead to Fatima Third Secret, Fatima Secret 3B, right? And it doesn't take much to get me on this anyway, but this is where all of the stuff from the church in the 1960s really gets most interesting. Okay, Paul VI was a gay Mason. People kind of knew that at the time anyway. Bunini is a gay Mason or whatever. Yeah, have you been to the Novus Ordo? It's, I mean, I go. I'm not, but it had to be a gay Mason that wrote this. But when we start talking about the Third Secret of Fatima, it's like, this is scary stuff, and I don't know what. I mean, JP2 ends up releasing it 22 years into his pontificate, but he doesn't end up releasing it, right? He ends up releasing
exactly
this inscrutable, because each of the 3 parts of Fatima, for those who don't know, I talk with my hands so much as an Italian that this thing's in danger. But each of the 3 secrets of Fatima have really 2 parts: a visual component, like a little holographic image that she showed the kids, and then her explanation. Even one's she shows them a vision of hell with demons roiling in burnished bronze, and then she says, "What you've seen is a vision of hell, where the souls of poor sinners go." Then she shows them you know, the geopolitical Russia thing, the unfaithful woman, how they that she was talking about an unfaithful woman. Then she says, now this is about Russia. There will be 2 world wars, blah, blah, blah. And then, so there's, you know, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. What ended up being sat on from 1960 to the year 2000, where like all the major press and the world, secular press, LA Times, New York Times, London Examiner, were all waiting for the release, and they had to wait 40 years. Eventually, JP2 releases it in May, I think, of 2000. But all it releases is this inscrutable holographic image without
no context.
Story part. Yeah, no words of the Virgin, and we know there are.
That's
words.
right. Because if you remember, up until that point, the only words we had of Our Lady from the Third Secret verifiable were, in Portugal, the dogmas of the faith will always be maintained. ... followed by an ellipsis.
Right.
So where's the rest of what Our Lady said?
Right.
We're just supposed to pretend that, oh, you know, pay no attention to the man behind the screen.
Exactly. I asked you this on Quite Frankly's show too, but I'm like, I mean, I don't know if one time over a beer or something, you and Father Martin, we were just like, hey man, we've been homies for a while. I don't know how long you were homies before.
And that's how he said it too. He said homies.
Homeboys. You're like, yo, my nigga. What's 3B? I mean, he got kind of real with you a couple times, didn't he? I mean, he kind of did with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM, like 4 or 5 of those times.
Yeah. He said that 3B, the part that everybody wants to know, the secret sauce, right? Well, first off, he took the papal oath not to reveal it in its entirety detail, but he did tell me things that were in it. All right. Such as the apostasy in the church would begin at the very top. Another thing he told me was that because it's only written down on one side of one sheet of paper.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. She did not write chapters. It's one side of one sheet of paper, and that's it. It talks about the great apostasy, and it does talk about material chastisements that would befall the church and the nations because they continue to offend God. And then he said, because he although it has not been approved by the church, it was his, and it's a personal opinion. He said that he thought that after the Vatican said in February 1960, you know, we're not releasing the message, shortly thereafter, the Virgin Mary as Our Lady of Mount Carmel begins to appear in the Cantabrian Mountains, little village called Garabandal, Spain. And her message there was almost identical to the message of Fatima. And then you had the messages to Sister Agnes Sasagawa in the early 1970s in Japan. And they were almost identically the same. And in fact, it was Cardinal Ratzinger who said, you know, for the people who were obsessing about the third message of Fatima, read what Our Lady said at Akita.
Yep. He did say that. And at Akita.
For people who don't know, what did Our Lady say at Akita?
That chastisement is coming, right?
That there would be bishops against bishops, cardinals against cardinals, and because of the sinfulness of humanity and the sinfulness in the church and bad pastors, that God was going to send a great chastisement at some point where the living would envy the dead.
Oof.
That's heavy duty.
Yeah.
And she was also cured of her deafness by Our Lady.
Yep. In one ear. Yeah, Sister Agnes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she'd been raised a Buddhist, and that a lot of people don't know this, that the Madonna statue, the wooden statue that shed tears like 111 times and tested by whatever secular or Jewish scientists, probably not Catholic in-house jobs. Human tears, saline tests, and everything. That was a Our Lady of All Nations statue, which also seems to sort of christen Our Lady, the message at Our Lady of All Nations. A lot of people overlook that.
That's a statue there.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's Our Lady of All Nations there, which Our Lady of All Nations gets really real too. And then if you I don't know, I've never known what to think about Garabandal. I tell my people this all the time. I don't know what you think about it. Like Sister Conchita, doesn't she live on Long Island? And isn't
I met her
from Garabandal supposed to come to pass before she dies? She's like 75 or something.
Oh, you got to meet her.
Yes.
That's great.
You met her?
Yeah, that's what he said.
I met her.
Okay.
I met her. Malachi arranged for me to meet her back in the mid 1990s. She lived out on Long Island with her husband. I think his name was Patrick Kina. He was a U.S. Navy officer who met her when he traveled to Spain or was stationed there. She moved to the United States, and every week on Thursday, she would have a holy hour of an entire rosary to Our Lady for reparations for sins committed against the Immaculate Heart. And the people who were there, they were very just like middle class, regular, very nice people, and, the people such as myself who were the guests, nobody went up to her and said, "Really? Did you see the Virgin Mary? Really? Really?" There was no sensation. It was all very quiet. And afterwards, she served coffee and tea and some pastries and cookies, and there was quiet conversation. And then I left after about an hour and maybe 30 minutes or so, but she was a very nice, very quiet, unassuming woman. I mean, you could tell that from her personality, she was the kind of woman that shrinks from the spotlight.
Yeah. Well, how old is she? I mean, because am I correct?
She's in her mid 70s by now. Yes.
Oh, so she's still with us then.
So she's still with us. And that's key to Garabandal. The message of Garabandal is this stuff needs to happen by the time the death of the seer, which was not necessarily the case. So I mean that means everything's gonna fall apart, within 20 years if she lives to be 95. Am I right?
This is her right here, I guess.
Yeah, that's Sister Agnes.
Yeah, that's not Conchita. That's
I'm sorry.
That's Sister Agnes.
Yeah. And the sad thing about Sister Agnes is she died in absolute poverty.
Oh.
Did she?
The modernists over in Japan, they basically kicked her out of the convent. They made her find a room with a little old lady somewhere sweeping the floors, and she died in obscurity.
Oh my God.
It wasn't that long ago either.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Couldn't get a private benefactor to, put her up, where she could put her feet up someplace and
it's too bad.
Get a white.
She was a victim soul, I guess, in the true sense of the word.
Yeah. Well, so what? We should. I guess we should take some super chats, and we'll take the bigger ones first. But I mean, what do you think's going to happen? It sounds like if you put all this stuff together, you have gay Mason. We got the still got Bunini's Novus Ordo, and then we put all Fatima 3 and Akita, which took place on October 13th, 1973, by the way, and the famous assassination of JP2, and then Sister Conchita's set in her mid 70s. What did Malachi ever get real with you and just be like, hey man, you're younger than I am. Stuff's going to happen probably during your life. Or
it's funny you say it that way, because I said, all right, Malachi, I realize you can't tell me exactly what's written down, but when you're no longer with us, or as you like to say, when you're playing a harp, later on in my life, wherever I end up, do I want to end up living in the United States east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi? And he said, definitely not west of the Mississippi.
Okay, good. I made the right move then.
We're in Mississippi. On the east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, we were in Mississippi, just on the east of Mississippi. Well, I mean,
sorry, I got to read this comment real quick. Somebody said at least she didn't confuse Sister Agnes with Donkey Kong.
That would have been worse. Yeah. Sister Agnes Sasagawa. I should be respectful, but that gives you a clue as to how Sister Conchita and Sister Agnes were. One's Spanish, one's Japanese. But I mean, was he joking? Was he fooling on you?
Not really. No, he just made it in passing. He said, "Well, I wouldn't live west of the Mississippi."
Sheesh. Well,
and it was just a very casual comment. I said, "Okay, point taken."
I'm only a little bit east of the Mississippi. I'm in Mississippi. So
well, I think what he was talking about is the fact that, due to the whole plate tectonics issue, you've got the area from San Diego all the way up into British Columbia that's on the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
And at some point they're just long overdue.
Yeah.
And if it happens in a certain way, will it be a chastisement from God? Some people might read it that way.
That's where we're from. We're from California.
Yeah, we're native.
Yeah.
We're native. Angelina is both my wife and I. So,
well, another interesting thing is this. They talk about the Pope having to flee Rome. All right. Mm-hmm. Naples is not that far from Rome as the crow flies. All right. And I'm sure you're aware that right at Naples, in addition to Vesuvius, slightly to the north of Naples, there is the Campi Flegrei supervolcano, which is the Italian equivalent of Yellowstone in the United States. And that is overdue to blow its top.
Volcanism. Dig it.
Vesuvius too.
Yeah, my family, my Italian family's from near Naples. There's a little town called Acera. And we've been there. We stopped by there. It was an absolute shithole. But
well, it's funny because one of the because they don't get any villagers there, or visitors. I'm sorry, visitors there, and so all the villagers came out to basically ask us what the heck we were even doing there. And one of them actually tried to propose marriage to your cousin. Remember? And he asked her if she was a good cook. That was his only question.
That was all.
Can she cook?
That's enough info for Acera Italian. Oh, I get. Yeah. Well, let's take some super chats. I'm always, man. I mean, Malachi Martin sounded like halfway like he was spilling his guts to Art Bell on those Coast to Coast AM sessions where they were just kind of rapping. He would always say, "Keep your eyes on the skies." I'm like, well, what? Come on, man! You're giving us like 90% of the tale. Just give us the end page there. Give us the epilogue.
Well, he had it. Well, he had a very clear view. He said if he was of the mind that things were so bad that. And obviously he was mistaken, but he admitted he could be. And he said, Our Lady will intervene in a very visible way in human events such that the entire world will be put on notice and they will know in a spiritual sense where they stand before God.
That's Garabandal, right? Isn't that?
That's what people call the warning, but saints going back as far as the late Middle Ages have spoken about such an event.
Where no one can deny the truth of the Roman Catholic faith, and it'll involve Our Lady, and it's just such a thing. Because,
but I asked Malachi, I said, does that mean everyone's going to become Catholic? And he said, no, there's going to be a lot of people, if not the majority of people, who are going to parenthetically flip their finger at God and say, how dare you disturb my comfortable life?
That doesn't make sense though, right? I mean,
it doesn't. Because if you're, a secular humanist, you're Jewish, you're Episcopalian, you're Buddhist, you're Muslim, whatever. But if you see all of a sudden you are transported spiritually or whatever, and I'm just spitballing, you're transported spiritually to where you are alone with the man on the cross on Calvary. Right. And what is your reaction to that? And how does his dying eyes, how do they see your soul? How could you not be impelled by love towards that?
It doesn't make sense.
But then again, how could Uncle Jeff and his infamous island, how could he have gotten away with all the stuff he got away with, and so many people knew it was wrong?
Well, because of it. Because of the.
Did we touch upon that phrase, the mystery of iniquity?
Yeah, mystery of iniquity. That's the ultimate sort of golden parachute out of all these conversations, where it's like,
well, it's the mystery of evil. What are you going to do?
mass apostasy in the church, how does that square with you know, ecclesial indefectibility? It's like, oh, mystery of iniquity. And how do what about Paul the Sixth? You know, what about you know, John the 23rd? What about the third secret of Fatima being buried? Oh, mystery of iniquity. What about?
Well, let me ask you, Tim. Do I get a pass because I say it's above my pay grade?
Yeah, that's another one of those ones. It's fine. That's kind of an Obama-ism that got really popular to say around 2012, and I'll accept it. I'll accept it long enough to take some of these super chats anyway.
Sure.
So.
And is this
and by the way, I just want to say that I was very grateful, very, very grateful to everyone who purchased the book because they made it a bestseller for 10 weeks.
Is this the correct one?
Wow.
This is your most recent one?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there it is.
Yes, it is. Tim, I sent you a copy of that, didn't I?
Yeah, you sent me 2 copies of it, and I need to. Okay. I was boning up on it before I went on, quite frankly, with you a few months back now. Gosh, more than a few. Well, you know, 4 months back now. But I'm going to break that thing back out and look at it. I mean, yeah. So that's it. Yeah, everyone go buy this book. Is that large on the screen, Steph?
Yeah, I was trying to. Let me get a better. I wanted the description up there for a while, but here's the actual cover.
And by the way, Anthony Stein's wife, Crystal, helped design that cover.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah, she did.
I like Anthony a lot.
God bless her. She did a great job.
Anthony and I are great friends.
Oh, I didn't know.
We share a very passionate interest in 80s heavy metal.
Yeah, they're
based.
We're more 90s sort of thrash metal in this household, but we're all metalheads.
Just as long as you tell me you don't walk around. Well, Steph, he doesn't yarl in the shower, does he?
I've never heard that.
You know, I got in trouble on another show. I got in trouble on another show because I made a reference to does more cowbell ring a
oh my gosh.
Of course, don't feel
love it. Here, I gotta put that on the screen. I'm gonna put more cowbell.
Well,
I made a reference to that, and people bombarded the chat with, "This man has no credibility because he listens to a band like Blue Oyster Cult, and they're all Satanists, and he's going to hell." And I'm like, "Oh, good Lord,
that's a good song."
Bingo.
Catholicism saved me from Roman Catholics. That's what I say a lot of times.
If they're not complaining about Tim's hair or the fact that there's a skull on the program or that he doesn't wear a suit, it's like they're going to complain about really good music. It's like, guys, this isn't the channel for you then.
Anthony's a real guy. He and I got off on the wrong foot many years ago, probably 8 years ago now, but I like him a lot. I respect him a lot. He and I agree about a lot. But give him my best. His wife did a good job, a bang up job on the cover of that book, and
she did an awesome. The publisher Simon & Schuster saw what she did, and they basically said, "Hey, fine by us."
Sweet,
wow,
sweet. I'm surprised Schuster published that. By the way,
pardon me.
I'm surprised because they're so liberal that Simon & Schuster chose to publish her book. I'm glad they did because it's a big audience, but
they know what sells. And they know it's good, what people want.
They know what sells. And they also published a number of Malachi's bestsellers too. So he was known to them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I was also, through the grace of God and nothing else, I was fortunate enough to actually get a talent agent through Paramount Talent Agency in New York City. And they're like one of the big 5. And I totally by accident got them through my accountant. Just kind of blundered into it and was very fortunate that my agent Ian went to bat for me very strongly.
Amen. We all need an agent that goes to bat for us. Steph, you want to read us one of those puppies?
I think we have some super chats. Yeah. You guys have some time and some game for that. Okay, so first one, you should watch the 1973 movie with Martin Sheen called Catholics. It's full on YouTube, or I guess free on YouTube. It shows the church that has caved completely to modernism on Vatican IV, trying to shut down a traditional monastery. Greetings from BR.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you.
I just saw that movie 2 weeks ago. And you know who recommended I see it, Tim? Anthony Stein.
Oh.
Anthony. That's funny. Is it any good?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's about an hour and 10 minutes. And I don't want to give away any spoilers. Watch it and you're going to be like, "Wait a minute. did these guys know the Church of Bergoglio?
Right. Like reading Windswept House.
Yeah, but it's very much worthwhile.
Cool.
This is from, I think, Lauren H. Malachi Martin was not under any U.S. authority while he was here. Was he reporting directly to JP2? And do you know what happened when Malachi Martin met with JP2 in 1995 that caused him to change his opinion of John Paul II? He said he would not help us and was dangerous.
Well, the latter part of that sentence is a little bit unclear. Who is the he who would not help us? John Paul
I'm
II?
guessing JP2. Yeah, I guess that's what she means.
He was not under authority here. He was not incarnated in the United States. He was, and I want to get this straightened out, by the way. He was made a bishop in pectore for his work behind the Iron Curtain. Now, I originally had the original 2 people who actually performed the Episcopal consecration in the book. When I got the book back from the CIA's Classification Review Board, they said, take those names out or you can't publish the chapter.
Really? Why did they?
Yes, really. Well, you know why? Because my best guess as an ex-agency officer is that one of the people I named had a relationship with the CIA, and they were afraid that me naming him publicly in a book would have blown it.
Gotcha. Yeah,
So I just changed the name, but someone called me out on it in Amazon in the reviews, and they said, I know that Bishop so-and-so wasn't doing this, this, and this in August of 1956. Therefore, the entire book is fiction. And I was like, my attitude, had I been able to reach out to the guy, would have been, all right, tell you what, Skippy, you drive down to Route 123 in McLean, Virginia, drive up to the main headquarters gate of the Central Intelligence Agency, walk up to the guard inside at the visitor center and tell him you just want to go inside and speak to the people in Russian internal operations about what's really going on.
They want to talk to your manager.
Yeah. It's like, seriously?
Yeah.
But, whatever. You just, like Malachi said, if people are throwing mud at you, it's because mud is all they have.
Right. So it was 1956? It was that early that he was?
He was ordained in 54. And he went behind the Iron Curtain in 57, 58.
Okay. And in pectore Episcopal incarnation, that lasts for life. Right? I mean, it's just like any other ordination. You can never.
What it does is technically it lasts so long as either the Pope who authorized it or his successors continue to authorize it. Okay. And that was maintained from Pius XII through John Paul II.
Okay. So interesting. So he confirmed to you that he was a Bishop Malachi Martin.
Well, it gets better. He asked me, he said, when were you confirmed? And I told him in 1977. And he asked me some questions about the rite. And I told him, and he said, there's a very good likelihood your confirmation was invalid. Would you like me to conditionally confirm you?
Oh, wow.
And he did. We actually got a sponsor, a very good Catholic friend of ours named Sal. And he was my sponsor, and he conditionally confirmed me in the old rite.
Yeah, I've thought of getting one of those a lot.
Just in case.
Being confirmed in the early 90s. It just can't hurt, But yeah, that's neat. You got it from the man himself, Bishop Malachi Martin.
The next super chat says it seems that Vatican II Malachi leaked serious council info to Jewish groups under pseudonyms Michael Seraphin, F.E. Cartis, etc. Can you verify or deny?
I can do neither, and the reason why, and this is just blunt, I wasn't there. I wasn't there, and
did he ever
it
mention
never
that?
became a topic of our conversation for me to go, hey, did you release secret stuff to the Jewish Defense League or the ADL?
Yeah.
That never would have entered my mind.
No. Because there's a general rule of people having dinner with important people, like, and it's everyone. It's not just you, or it's not some act of coward. It's just, you're having dinner with important people. You want to keep having dinner with important people, and at some level, we also just don't
piss them off.
Yeah, and there's a level of decorum and closeness that when you ask certain questions.
I've thought to ask you that before about the Michael Seraphin stuff, but I'm like, I doubt he brought this up.
Well, I have you. Have you released any secrets under
that people ask me this about lots of folks all the time. Oh, when they'll say this, and next time you have dinner with Michael Knowles, tell him he needs to like grow a pair over Israel. I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll get right on it.
Exactly.
You do that. Wait, oh yeah, you don't know him. Okay. All right.
Next super chat, Malachi. Am I saying that right? I feel like I'm saying
Malachi. I used to say Malachi. I think
Malachi. Thank you. Malachi Martin said Mary said in the third secret that it would happen, quote, at the end of the second millennium. Malachi Martin and JP2 assumed the year 2000, but it seems it must be 2033.
What do you make of that, Rob?
I'm unaware of where he said that Mary said, which now we're crossing into hearsay territory,
right,
in the third secret, that it would happen. The Pope seemed to be convinced, rightly or wrongly, that Our Lady was going to intervene in human events again on the order of something like Fatima. And Malachi believed it too. But Malachi also said, if it doesn't happen by the year 2000, then the Catholics in the world are in for several generations of white martyrdom.
That's good.
Yikes.
Hey, it's not red martyrdom, right?
Yeah, at least it's not red.
Yeah.
Next super chat. Where is Malachi Martin's last book, Primacy? How the institutionalized Roman Catholic Church became a creature of the New World Order? Any idea?
Yes, he took it to his grave because he was at the point in writing where, I'm a relatively new author. I've only been doing it for 5 years now. And I have found out that whatever topic you write on, if you want to come across credibly, you're talking anywhere between 6 to 12 months of nothing but heavy duty, deep research. And that's the phase he was at with that book. It was just research. There is no hidden manuscript that was taken away by, Jesuits in the night.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was just at the research level. The same way that people say he was murdered. I'm like, no, he was not. I'm one of the last people he ever spoke to when he was alive. He was not murdered. He told me he took a fall. And then I heard Mrs. Lavanos yelling at him in the background, Malachi, hang up the phone. The ambulance people are here. Those are the last words I ever spoke to him.
Oh, wow. And how long after that did he pass away?
About 10 days. He suffered a cerebral brain bleed by striking his head, and he died in the intensive care unit of Lenox Hill Hospital in New York. I remember that while he was hooked up to all the machines, he was in a coma, all the beeping machines. And, I said a rosary for him, and, and he died 2 days later.
Wow. So you might have been one of the last people he spoke to, at least from his house.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Wow.
It's wild. He was really a cab driver for a while in New York, right?
He was a cab driver, and he was also a dishwasher in a Greenwich Village donut shop.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's crazy. Yeah, our mutual Frank, he just loves that so much, which is, he's a good New York. So.
Yeah. Next super chat. What do you think of
I love him.
Yeah, he's such a good guy. What do you think of the late Father Gruner and John Venari? I feel like if their Fatima Center Questions YouTube channel were running today instead of 12 years ago, it'd be peak in Christ.
Yeah, these people are fitting to get pissed. You know, this is not me saying it, though. They're asking you, what do you think of John Bernard? God repose his soul, and Father Gruner.
Yes, and they were warriors for Christ, and especially Our Lady, especially Father Gruner. I remember Malachi told me that, you know, Father Gruner was especially beloved of Our Lady, but because of that, he had a long, lonely, and difficult life in defending the Blessed Mother and Fatima, because he said the institutional church had their knives out for him.
Yeah.
But he persevered anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my question for Malachi Martin, if I had one, is how is the apostasy of the church from the tippy top supposed to coexist with, because this was a Paul VI show, right? And I said, there's no problem with VI being a bad man coexisting in tension with the fact that popes are supposed to be good men, but they usually aren't. But it's not so simple a story for apostasy from the tippy top of the church and, you know, ecclesial indefectibility. That would be my thing, is, you know, and maybe Malachi didn't, Father Martin didn't even know, you know, what were we joking? It's the mystery of iniquity. But that's my big question. I think that's a lot of people's most prominent question when they have this stuff confirmed for them, that the apostasy in the church is not just your imagination haranguing you. It's real. You know, it's real.
Well, that's where in a lot of his, have you ever heard any of Malachi's interviews with Bernard Jansen of Triumph Communications?
Yes, that's the guy that accused him of having sex with his wife or something.
No,
no,
that's Robert Blair Kaiser from National Catholic Reporter.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yes, but yes, I have heard Bernard Jansen liked him.
Yes, Bernard Jansen is a very solid guy. I know Bernard. I'm sorry, what was the question again, Tim? My senior citizen moment just kicked in.
With Bernard Jansen, and I made this point about the apostasy in the church somehow has to coexist, has to come with, you know. In
his interviews with Bernard Jansen, he said that in addition to what Anthony Stein likes to describe as the ape of the church, that Malachi said there was also the beginnings of what he called the underground Catholic Church. And he included the Society of St. Pius X in the underground church. He said, because as long as you have priests who are willing to make the sacrifices to deliver valid sacraments to the people, even though their number is very, very small, it is still, if people know where to go, because he pointed this out to me once. We attended a talk by Count Neri Caponi, an Italian nobleman who was the senior lay prosecutor at the Apostolic Signatura and the Holy Roman Rota. And I asked in the question and answer period, I said, Count Caponi, if you compare the modernist crisis facing the church today, since the end of the Second Vatican Council, to the Arian heresy of the 3rd and 4th centuries, which would you say was worse for the church? And he said, without a doubt, the crisis we find ourselves in today. And then he went on to say something that I thought was very, very insightful. He said, but back then, the people had to trust the clergy because by and large, there was no huge middle class in the 300s and the 400s. He said, now with the access to information that Catholics have, you know how to obtain the information necessary to secure your salvation. There is no excuse.
That's true. That's true.
So it is. I mean, you know, the underground church. Oh, by the way, also, I wanted to say that, we started off talking about Paul VI and, the homosexuality and the Freemasonry. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that, a good amount of my information came from Randy Engel's writings. She wrote that massive, excruciatingly footnoted book entitled The Rite of Sodomy. And volume number 5 is where she conclusively, to her satisfaction, addresses the issue of Paul VI's sodomy. And then there's a good friend of mine who is, he actually is one of the people on the back of the book from Cambridge who endorsed it. He turned me on to this gentleman, Gene Gomulka, who's a former Navy officer, Navy chaplain. And he's an investigative researcher who has an amazing website, gomulka.net, in which if you really want to go down the rabbit hole on clerical homosexuality in the hierarchy and the priesthood, get yourself a 6-pack of beer and kick back with an iPad.
Sounds like a wild time.
Detoxing.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great and informational 2 hours. Thanks a million. Can you say the name of your book and where people can get it one more time? It's a Simon & Schuster book. Say where they can get it one more time, Rob.
Most easily available on Amazon.com in hardcover, in paperback, in Kindle format, and it'll be out in audiobook form in 2 months. And I'll tell you, I'll close with one surreal thing. There's actually this weird little cottage industry on Amazon where people were writing biographies of me, scraping information off the internet and doing the Amazon Kindle self-publishing thing. I actually ordered one of these books just to show my mother. Because it's who is this? Someone even wrote a book and it's still on Amazon and it's entitled Robert Marro's Thoughts on Malachi Martin.
Yeah, you told me like that last time we wrote.
It's surreal.
The internet's really a wild place, man. It's good work if you can get it, but it's a wild place and it's a wild way to, peddle what you got to peddle. So go check out. You said the book is, and I have a couple copies.
Malachi Martin in the Shadows of the Vatican on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Play Books, all the usual suspects, Tim.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Mr.
Thank
Robert
you.
Martin. Been great. We now know that Paul VI was fishy at the very best. And we have enough information at our fingertips in the internet age to get all of everything pertinent to soteriology to save our own souls. That's I like that as a closing note. And God only knows about some of this other stuff. God only can verify. But luckily,
that's right.
Not our job.
And you know what we do? We pray. We do what we can and we pray. We take up our own rosaries and pray. And by the way, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight, and by extension, by your wife. So thank you.
Thank you for coming. What a great show today.
Yeah, thanks a million, man. Keep us in your prayers. You'll be in our prayers for your little your upcoming surgery. Steph has a C-section coming up herself, so we'll all.
When's that scheduled for? I'll make sure to.
It's like 2 weeks.
The
like
27th of April, technically, unless I go into labor first. But this is our number 8, and they've all been C-sections.
God bless you.
God bless you.
She's good. She's a good lady.
It's a different ball game when you're in your 40s, but we're getting through.
She's short and skinny, but she's strong. God bless you, Rob. God bless you all. Retrogrades and retrogrades. Everybody go out and buy Rob's excellent Malachi Martin book. And we'll be back with more exciting shows next week. Everyone have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Peace.
Cheers.